Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Today on the deep dive, we're really unpacking quite a range of topics,
Yeah,
looking at everything from fresh perspectives on poverty in India to the intricacies of geopolitics, some hidden health consequences of COVID, and even, the cutting edge of AI reasoning.
quite a mix indeed. Lots to get into.
Absolutely. So let's start with our first article, which really challenges us to rethink poverty and food deprivation in India. Now, there was this World Bank estimate, April 2025, that sounded like, well, amazing news. It showed India's extreme poverty dropping dramatically from about 16.2% back in 2011-12 down to just 2.3% in 2022-23.
Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, that suggests extreme poverty is, well, almost gone. A huge achievement, you'd think.
Right, but then this article introduces a different way of measuring food consumption, using the thali meal.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite interesting because it's not just about calories, is it? It's trying to capture, proper nourishment, satisfaction, a more balanced picture for South Asia.
So let's get specific. Crystal estimates a decent home-cooked thali rice, dal, veggies, the works costs around, what, 30 rupees?
About that, yes.
Mhm.
And here's where it gets, well, quite different from the World Bank numbers.
That's true.
Using this Dali measure, the estimate for 2023-24 suggests that maybe up to 50%, half of the rural population, and 20% of urban folks couldn't actually afford two such thalis a day based on what they really spend on food.
50% in rural areas. That's
Yes.
a huge contrast. So what's the key difference in the calculation?
It boils down to a core assumption. This thali approach doesn't assume all your income is just sitting there waiting to be spent on food.
Ah, right. It accounts for other essential things.
Exactly. Rent, healthcare, maybe school fees, real life expenses.
Which makes a lot of sense. Now, what about the public distribution system, the PDS? Does that help?
It does, definitely.
Yeah.
When you factor in the subsidized or free food from PDS, those numbers drop. It goes down to about 40% in rural areas and 10% in urban areas who can't afford the two thalis.
Okay, so an improvement, but 40% in rural India is still, well, extremely high, isn't it? Even with PDS support.
It really is. Very high deprivation persists there.
And there was something quite surprising about who gets the subsidies, too. You'd think it's mostly the poorest, right?
You would hope so. But the data is quite revealing. It shows that higher income groups, say the top 5–10% in rural India, actually get subsidies that are about 88% of what the absolute poorest 5% receive.
88%, even though their overall spending is like 3 times higher.
Precisely. Now, the urban PDS is a bit better targeted, more progressive, but even there, something like 80% of beneficiaries still get subsidized food, even if they could technically afford those two thalis a day.
So a lot of the support isn't tightly linked to actual need.
It suggests there's room for restructuring, doesn't it? Maybe increase support at the very bottom and phase it out higher up.
But there's a complication, right? Something about cereal consumption.
Yes, this is quite fascinating. Cereal consumption, things like rice and wheat, is almost the same across all income groups. It implies everyone's kind of reached the level they want or need for cereals.
So the PDS has done its job there, equalizing access to basic grains.
Exactly. A success in that sense. But cereals are only about 10% of what households spend on average. So equalizing cereal intake doesn't solve the whole food deprivation picture.
So if not more cereals, what's the proposed solution?
The article suggests a middle path, focusing PDS expansion on pulses, dal, lentils, things like that.
Ah, okay. And why pulses specifically?
Because unlike cereals, there's a huge gap. The poorest households eat only about half the amount of pulses compared to the richest households. And pulses are, relatively costly, but a really vital source of protein for many Indians.
Makes sense. But how would that be funded?
Well, the idea is that by trimming some of the perhaps excessive cereal entitlements, remember, PDS covers 80 crore people, and some states have very large quotas you could free up funds.
So reallocating from cereals where needs seem met towards pulses where there's a clear gap.
Precisely. And it would also ease the pressure on the Food Corporation of India for stocking all that grain.
So wrapping up this first piece, the proposal is basically expand PDS for pulses, but also cut subsidies for those who are already consuming above a reasonable level, like the two thali benchmark.
Yeah, making the PDS more compact and effective.
Yeah.
The goal being to really equalize primary food consumption across India. That would be quite something.
It really highlights how the way you measure poverty changes the whole story, doesn't it? And what that means for designing policies that actually work for those who need them most.
Okay, let's shift from food security to broader public health. We're looking at India's progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. There's good news. India ranked 99th in 2025, up from 109th. That shows progress, especially in basic services.
True, there's definite progress. But the same report also flagged some pretty persistent challenges, didn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly in health and nutrition.
Especially in rural and tribal areas, yes. And if you zoom in on SDG 3, that's the one about ensuring healthy lives and well-being. India is actually not on track for several key 2030 targets.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like maternal mortality ratio, it's 97 when the target is 70. Under 5 mortality is 32, target's 25. Life expectancy is 70 years, aiming for over 73. Even things like out-of-pocket health spending are higher than the target. And immunization coverage, while good at 93%, hasn't hit that universal 100% goal.
So quite a few significant gaps remain. Why is that? What are the reasons behind these lags?
It's a mix of things, according to the source. There's the issue of access to quality healthcare, sometimes infrastructure problems, sometimes economic barriers. Then there are non-economic factors like nutrition, hygiene, sanitation, even lifestyle choices.
And cultural factors, too. Stigma preventing people using services.
Exactly. That can be a real barrier in some communities.
So given these challenges, how can we speed things up for SDG 3?
The article proposes a pretty compelling three-pronged approach, looking at both treatment and, crucially, prevention.
Okay, what are the three parts?
First, universal health insurance. Studies show it cuts down on those catastrophic health bills and improves equity. Second, high-quality primary health centers using things like digital tools, telemedicine to catch diseases early and reduce hospital visits.
And the third?
Health education right from the school level. This is highlighted as a really cost-effective prevention strategy.
School health education. That sounds crucial. What would that cover?
Things like healthy eating, hygiene, sanitation, reproductive health, even road safety and mental health. The idea is to build good health behavior early on, habits that stick through life.
And the potential impact could be huge, right? Affecting mortality rates, life expectancy, immunization.
Absolutely. If you look internationally, Finland's school health reforms in the 70s had a massive impact on reducing heart disease later on. Japan's compulsory health education is linked to better hygiene and longer lives.
So there's precedent for this working effectively.
Definitely. It suggests a structured health curriculum could be transformative in India, too.
So the takeaway here is really about concerted action. Policymakers need to integrate this health education, keep investing in universal coverage. And parents have a role, too, advocating for these topics.
It's about building that foundation. Educating young people on healthy habits, backed by stronger healthcare systems, is fundamental for sustainable progress, for that Viksit Bharat 2047 vision.
It really makes you think about the long game, how educating kids today about health can echo through generations. All right, let's pivot now to geopolitics, specifically the India-China relationship. There was a recent visit by Prime Minister Modi to China for the SEO summit, talks with President Xi Jinping.
And some significant decisions came out of that, restarting bilateral trade, air links, and that reaffirmation of needing peace and tranquility along the border.
And this comes, 5 years after Galwan? And just months after Operation Sindoor. The official line seems to be positioning them as development partners, not rivals.
That's trying to manage the differences.
Yeah.
But Vikachu offers some important historical context here. He points back to Rajiv Gandhi's 1988 visit.
What was the significance there?
That visit set a precedent. Normalized ties in other areas while trying to solve the border issue, with the absolute key being keeping peace on the line of actual control, the LAC. India wanted resolution. China was maybe less keen.
And Galwan in 2020 just completely shattered that understanding.
Profoundly.
Yeah.
It showed a much more aggressive Chinese approach and really upset that arrangement, far more than any previous incidents. Kachu also notes a difference in how India and China even describe the border issue's importance after the recent Modi-Xi meeting. Still different priorities, it seems.
Which leads to the big question, can India really normalize the relationship without sorting out the border?
Well, and Targosal Singh offers a different perspective. She argues it's maybe not an either-or situation. She sees signs of relations improving since early last year.
And she points to that 2024 Border Patrol agreement as a key moment.
Yes, Chinese sources apparently called it an icebreaker. From India's side, getting patrolling back in places like Demchok and Depsang is seen as a diplomatic win.
Though the Chinese view it just as a patrol agreement, not about sovereignty, creating these sort of buffer zones.
Right, that distinction is crucial. But Kachu remains quite concerned about the future. He warns another Galwan too would be disastrous for ties.
And he talks about a shift in India's strategic thinking.
Yeah, he suggests China is now seen as the main threat in Delhi, even more so than Pakistan, interestingly, despite China's ongoing support for Pakistan.
Why does he think that is?
He links it to China's ambition for global primacy, suggesting Beijing sees India as just, well, another South Asian country. He even cites Wang Yi calling Pakistan the most important stop on a trip.
And then there's the physical reality of China's massive infrastructure buildup in Tibet.
Exactly. Roads, military facilities.
Mm.
It forces India to spend heavily on fortifying its side of the LAC, which, as Kachu implies, raises questions about how serious China really is about resolving the border after all these years. And we still don't have a clear, authoritative reason for why Galwan happened.
Does Singh offer any insights into the Chinese thinking behind Galwan?
She mentioned some theories circulating in China, connecting it to the change in Article 370, or even economic competition, like fearing India partnering with the U.S. on supply chains.
And this strange India is a threat idea emerging in China.
Yes, apparently linked to concerns about India's economic rise and its younger population compared to China's demographic issues, which has led to things like pushback against Chinese investment in India.
So given all this complexity, can normalizing India-China ties really fit with China's wider plans for South Asia, like these trilateral meetings with Pakistan and Bangladesh?
Kachu's answer on that is pretty blunt. Of course not. He sees China viewing India as a rival that needs managing, pointing to these new regional mechanisms China is building, potentially aiming for a South Asian setup that includes India, but on China's terms.
But Singh brings it back to pragmatism, doesn't she?
She does. She argues that despite everything, good workable ties benefit both countries. She emphasizes the economic reality. India and the world rely heavily on Chinese manufacturing, especially in key sectors like EVs and critical minerals. The economic survey itself highlighted China's huge dominance there.
It's such a complex balancing act, isn't it? Economic interdependence versus deep geopolitical rivalry, historical baggage versus future ambitions. Really difficult waters to navigate. Okay, let's move into the science section now, and this is quite an unsettling piece. It's about the Cartesian study, which suggests a single COVID-19 infection could potentially age your arteries by 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, this is a pretty significant finding. It's the largest study of its kind, nearly 2,400 people across 18 countries, published in the European Heart Journal. Really makes you pause.
So what exactly is vascular aging?
It essentially means your arteries get stiffer. The lead author, Rosa Maria Bruno, put it starkly. Pulse wave velocity in women post-COVID matched women 5 to 10 years older.
And why is stiffer arteries a problem?
Well, it makes the heart work harder, which can raise blood pressure. And that increases the risk of serious issues down the line: heart attack, stroke, kidney problems, even dementia. And the scary part is, these changes are often invisible until something major happens.
Given the sheer number of COVID survivors worldwide, WHO estimates nearly 700 million, this could have massive long-term healthcare implications.
I mean, absolutely enormous. And what's particularly noteworthy is that this stiffening wasn't just seen in severe cases. It appeared even after mild infections.
How did they measure this stiffness?
They used something called carotid femoral pulse wave velocity, or PWV. It's considered the gold standard. They measured it around 6 months and then again at 12 months after infection. Faster PWV means stiffer arteries.
And the results were clear.
Very clear. All the COVID-positive groups had stiffer arteries than the controls. Even after accounting for other factors, their PWV was about 0.4 meters per second, faster, equivalent to about 5 years of arterial aging.
And the study highlighted a particular impact on women.
Yes, quite strikingly. Women showed higher stiffness regardless of how severe their COVID was. And for women who ended up in the ICU, the effect was equivalent to an extra decade of aging on their arteries.
Wow. And is there a link to long COVID?
There seems to be. Women with persistent symptoms like fatigue and breathlessness tended to have even stiffer arteries. Dr. Bruno theorizes that maybe women's stronger immune response, while good initially, might cause lingering damage if it stays overactive.
Is there any good news in this study? Did things improve over time?
There were some hints. In a smaller group followed for a year, the stiffness seemed to stabilize or slightly improve. But, and this is crucial, they saw no return to baseline. So no full recovery to pre-COVID levels was observed.
Did vaccination make a difference?
Yes, that was another important finding. Vaccination seemed to lessen the impact, especially in women.
Now, is this universally accepted? Are there other perspectives?
There are. Dr. Balbir Singh in Delhi urged some caution, pointing out the study didn't have pre-COVID baseline data for these individuals. So he argues it doesn't conclusively prove the acceleration. He also mentioned he hasn't personally seen a big shift in hypertensive patients in his practice post-COVID.
But other doctors are seeing related issues.
Yes, quite a few. Dr. Stanley Hazen at Cleveland Clinic feels a COVID history should inform preventative care because of links to heart problems and stroke. Others, like doctors at Brigham and Women's, report seeing things like myocarditis, palpitations, and even autonomic issues like POTS, which affects blood vessel regulation. And Mount Sinai has found vessel inflammation even after mild cases using advanced imaging.
What about India specifically? Was South Asia represented well in this study?
Not really. The study wasn't representative of South Asia. But there was an interesting finding. Asian participants in the control group initially had less stiff arteries than Westerners. However, after COVID, that difference vanished. The virus seemed to erase any ethnic advantage, as the article puts it.
So that leaves a really big question mark for India, doesn't it? A population already facing a huge burden of cardiovascular disease. What does this potential accelerated aging mean here, especially without specific local data?
Exactly. It's a risk that, for now, remains largely invisible, but potentially very significant. It underscores why we need localized research, and why knowing your own health history, including COVID, is becoming increasingly important for preventive care.
Moving now to West Asia and India's foreign policy stance, there's been analysis of India's recent condemnation of an Israeli bombing in Doha, which was described as notably sharper than usual.
Yes, calling it a violation of sovereignty was quite direct, a noticeable shift from how India has typically responded to Israeli operations in other countries in the region.
Can you remind us what happened in Doha?
Sure, on September 9th, the IDF bombed a house in Doha. Reports suggest Hamas leaders were meeting there to discuss a U.S. ceasefire proposal. 5 people were killed. Israel, specifically PM Netanyahu, defended it, claiming Qatar harbors and funds Hamas.
And India's reaction was strong.
Very strong and quite formal. India's ambassador in Geneva, Arindam Bagchi, condemned it unequivocally at the UN Human Rights Council, citing the UN Charter, international law, saying it threatened peace and security. This followed statements from the MEA and even a call from PM Modi expressing solidarity with Qatar.
How does this compare to India's reactions to past Israeli actions, say, in Lebanon or Syria or Iran?
It's quite different. In the past, India might have expressed some concern, maybe if a UN post was hit in Lebanon or the Iranian embassy in Damascus, but often there was silence on other attacks. There's even a mention of an Indian army chief once calling an Israeli operation in Beirut a masterstroke.
And the stance on Iran has been inconsistent, too.
Very much so. From calling for dialogue to not joining an SEO condemnation, then later signing a different SEO declaration that did condemn strikes on Iran, it's been, well, puzzling at times.
So the big question is, why the much stronger, clearer stance on the attack in Qatar? What makes Qatar different?
Experts point to a few key reasons. Former Ambassador Navdeep Suri emphasizes the extremely close bilateral ties, the large Indian diaspora in Qatar, the personal relationship between PM Modi and the Emir. He frames it partly as transactionalism, focusing on the specific relationship rather than just abstract principles.
And economic factors.
Definitely. Former Ambassador Thomas Ahmad highlights Qatar being a crucial supplier of gas to India, a major energy interest there.
Ahmad also mentioned a broader geopolitical shift.
Yes, this is important. He argues the attack on Qatar puts other Gulf states, many hosting U.S. bases and relying on U.S. security, on notice. It suggests Israel's operations now take priority over normalization efforts, and maybe the U.S. isn't the guaranteed protector for the GCC anymore. It's a potential game changer for regional dynamics.
And we saw the Gulf countries reacting with alarm.
That emergency Arab League and OIC session in Doha, condemning Israel and talking about a joint defense mechanism, that signals real concern.
What does all this mean for India's overall policy in West Asia? Is the silence on Gaza sustainable?
It's becoming increasingly difficult. The article notes that the silence on Gaza, where the death toll is tragically high, is straining ties with the Arab world. India did issue a rare statement in late August, calling civilian deaths shocking, and voted for a UN resolution supporting the two-state solution recently.
So, signs of adjustment.
It seems so. Despite the strong relationship with Israel, India appears to be increasingly factoring in these broader regional shifts and the sentiment in the Arab world. It really shows how foreign policy is this complex weave of interests, economic, diaspora, relationships, geopolitics, leading to these nuanced, sometimes shifting positions.
Let's turn now to a domestic issue causing significant distress. The onion crisis in Maharashtra. We're seeing widespread protests by farmers.
Yes, thousands of farmers started this phone protest around September 12th.
Yeah.
The core issue is a really drastic fall in the market prices they're getting for their onions.
What are they asking for?
Their immediate demands are for government intervention and aid, specifically $1,500 per quintal. But the underlying problem seems systemic. Overproduction this year, plus the onions they stored from the Rabi season are now deteriorating.
How bad is the financial situation for them?
It sounds dire. They're reportedly earning only 800 to 1,000 euro per quintal, but their production costs are way higher, somewhere between 2,200 and 2,500 per quintal. So significant losses. And those stored onions losing quality just forces them to sell at even lower prices.
And government actions are actually making things worse in this case.
It appears so, inadvertently. Government agencies like NCCF and NAFED are releasing their buffer stocks onto the market at cheaper prices. This is usually done to control prices when they get too high for consumers.
But now it's pushing prices down even further when farmers have excess stock they need to sell.
Exactly. So the farmers are demanding these sales stop because it's undermining their already weak position.
It's a real example of an unintended consequence, isn't it? A policy meant to help consumers is now hurting producers badly.
Precisely. The price stabilization policy is backfiring in the current market conditions.
What are the proposed solutions then? What needs to change?
Several key things come up. Firstly, a stable export policy is crucial. Onion exports have plummeted more than halved from 2022-23 to now. These policy flip-flops, like sudden export bans, damage India's reputation as a reliable supplier.
And we've lost markets because of that.
Yes, traditional buyers like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka have looked elsewhere. Countries like China and Pakistan have apparently stepped in during India's periods of policy uncertainty. Farmers and exporters are also asking for incentives to help boost exports again.
Is there anything the state government could do directly?
One suggestion is for Maharashtra to emulate what Andhra Pradesh does, procure onions directly from farmers at a base price, in Andhra's case $1,200 per quintal, to provide some protection.
It really paints a picture of how complex agricultural markets are and how policy needs to be nimble and consider the impact on farmers, not just consumers or trade balances. Finally, let's delve into the world of artificial intelligence, specifically tackling one of its biggest hurdles, teaching AI to reason.
Yeah, and reasoning here means more than just knowing facts or predicting the next word. It's about, following steps, spotting mistakes, rethinking, adjusting strategy, like how we solve problems.
Things we do every day, math problems, coding, making decisions. Now, current AI models like GPT-4 have shown some signs of this, right?
They have, surprisingly so at scale, and techniques like chain of thought prompting have definitely helped boost that performance.
But these methods have limitations.
Big ones. They usually need lots of human-created examples, which is slow, expensive, and can bake in human biases. Plus, it limits the AI. It can only really learn the methods humans show it.
So the breakthrough comes from the DeepSeek AI team with their R1 model, published in Nature. What was their big idea?
They asked, could an AI teach itself to reason without human examples? And they found it could. R1 developed new ways of reasoning, using reinforcement learning, basically trial and error, guided only by whether the final answer was right or wrong.
How did that reinforcement learning setup work?
They started with a base model, V3 base. They used this technique called Group Relative Policy Optimization. The model, called R10 initially, solved math and coding problems. It generated its thinking process and the final answer.
And the reward was purely based on the answer.
Exactly. Just correct or incorrect judged by things like an answer key or a code compiler. Critically, as the article says, no one told the model how its reasoning should look.
What happened during training? How did it learn?
It was fascinating. Through thousands of trials, it reinforced the paths that led to right answers and learned to avoid wrong ones. But what was really striking was that it spontaneously started writing longer, more reflective reasoning. It even used phrases like wait or let's try again.
Like it was correcting itself, thinking out loud.
Precisely. It showed this emergent ability to self-correct, to reflect on its process.
Was there any human fine-tuning later on?
Yes, to create the final R1 model from R10. They refined it to make the reasoning clearer, more readable, ensure consistent language use, and improve safety. So R1 inherited the raw reasoning power but became more practical.
And the results were impressive.
Absolutely stunning. On a tough math exam, the AAME 2024 R10's accuracy jumped from about 15% to nearly 78%, eventually reaching almost 87% better than the average human student. That weight popping up showed it wasn't just following a script, but actively rethinking.
And R1 performed well on other tasks, too.
Yes, beyond math and coding, it showed big improvements on general knowledge, Q&A, and instruction following tests, too.
So what are the pros and cons of this self-correcting reasoning approach?
Well, a pro is efficiency R1 uses more computational effort only for harder problems. More significantly, for tasks where answers can be verified objectively, like math or code, this could massively reduce the need for expensive human-labeled data, cutting costs and potentially bias.
But the downsides?
Reinforcement learning itself can be very energy-intensive. And for tasks without clear right-wrong answers like creative writing, you still need human data or better reward signals. Plus, ensuring safety, preventing harmful outputs, remains a huge challenge.
It's quite mind-bending, isn't it? Watching a machine essentially develop reflective behavior on its own. If reasoning can emerge like this, what about creativity or deeper understanding?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really pushes the boundaries of what we think AI is capable of. As the article provocatively ends, perhaps, time will tell unless DeepSeek R1 figures it out first.
A truly fascinating development to watch. It certainly gives you a lot to ponder about the future of intelligence itself. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.